Catherine Paskell and I'm an independent theatre director. I'm also the artistic director of Dirty Protest, which is a new writing theatre company that works across Wales as well as across the UK and internationally. We started the workshop by getting the students together and doing a warm-up. And in this warm-up, what they had to do was walk towards someone in a circle, and then the person they were walking towards could only be freed by someone across the circle saying their name. And one of the reasons we started with that warm-up was to try and get the students focused, to be thinking about space, to be thinking about their relationship to each other, and also starting to think about what does it mean to be scared or to have a threat coming towards you. Because in the play Mametz that we were going to explore after that, that constant fear of war and missiles and bombs coming towards you is a really important atmosphere and environment for the characters in the play. So we wanted to start to introduce that with the warm-up. We then went on to the first exercise, and the students had to come up with a tableau, a still image, that responded to either a painting about the Welsh in Mametz Wood or to the poem Mametz by Owen Shears. And one of the things the students had to do was decide what's the difference between physicalising a poem and physicalising an image, so that they could actually explore how that helps them theatrically. Because plays play with words, they're written texts, but they're also visual. Okay, so as you guys are looking at this, what emotions, thoughts, feelings do you think this evokes in you?
You can see like the different things like pride, and like it looks as if they're regretful, and there's some people, obviously there's someone there that's dead, and the feelings that the person, like a friend or a family member, is feeling towards that person.
So it was about exploring how do we physicalise words and images, but also thinking about how do we physicalise horror. So what does it do to us, to our bodies, to have to physicalise that image? And sometimes physicalising something can be even more horrific than talking about it. So it was to try and introduce some of those themes to the students, as well as thinking about, as a director, the style that I was interested in making. And that style that I wanted to explore with this version of Mametz was a stylised interpretation of the script. The next activity was that we divided the students up into groups, because each individual group or pair would be looking at different ways of exploring the text. So we wanted to explore what the students' relationship was with the audience. And that's something that's really important as a director for you to be thinking about, because sometimes the actor can get well into the world and be thinking about, it's just about my relationship with another actor on stage. And that was something that we explored, but we always wanted to be mindful of what the relationship was between the actors and the audience. One of the pairs of students were exploring a scene where two lovers meet on a beachfront and they're on a pier. And when the students first started, they were very much talking to each other, they were heads down.
His uniform wasn't like other soldiers I'd seen. The cloth was Brethyn Gwyrdd, Welsh homespun. We had just 2 months before we left for France.
They saw us off with a full parade.
And then we asked them to think about, if you're trying to convince an audience that you love this person, that this person is the most important person in the world, and that to leave them back in Wales to go and fight a war in France is going to break your heart, how can you do that by talking directly to the audience to make them feel the way that you might feel? And you can see in the second time round that they did the task. It was much more compelling and it was much more believable, because by the actors talking directly to the audience, it changed the audience's relation to the students.
But what I want you to do this time is, rather than tell each other, tell us.
But if we hadn't enlisted, then we wouldn't have met. That's what I tell them. The division trained in Luddenham, see? We'd watch them drilling on the front with brooms and walking sticks and rifles. Every morning, they went for a 2-mile run. I started getting up early just to see them. Then, after 5 o'clock, they were free.
Until lights out at 10.
Another aspect that we looked at was the relationships between performers on stage. And so what we asked the students to do was to think about status between each other.
Taylor. Hi, Griffith, you got through. How's the major? Strap me and scam your leg. In this headquarters? We've got to be somewhere, and if they can find us here at night too, take a report. We're to secure the line against the counterattack. This pretty irregular, from about 300 yards from the end of the wood, bending back towards the west.
If a character comes into the scene who is a higher or a lower status than you, how might that change the way that you stand or the spatial relationship between you and that other performer? Okay, so who's the person who's most in charge? Who's like the highest status person?
General.
Great. So how do we know that you're the most important person? Great, so it's to do with your stature and the way that you stand. So we need to see a difference between our most important person, our then next most important people. Are you guys on the same level, or is there a status between you guys as well?
I think we're the same.
You're the same. Brilliant. So just how would you show us then, in terms of the way that you stand, how you guys are the same and you're different? Let's just have a look at you guys and how you stand. Brilliant. Okay, so what we've got here as well is you guys slightly looking down and you're looking slightly up and over them. Great. And what's interesting here is you guys are standing really close to each other and we've got more of a gap here. So this shows us that he's a bit more in charge because you're close together and you're further apart. So you can see that once the students were given that direction, they were then able to better show what the status was between the characters by standing further apart from each other or standing closer to each other, but also thinking about how they moved through their environment.
Taylor. Griffith, you go through. How's the major? Shrapnel, it's got me leg. And is this headquarters? We've got to be somewhere, and if they can find us at night too, take a report. We're to secure the line against counterattacks. It's pretty irregular, from about 300 yards from the end of the wood.
So the reason why it's important for directors to be thinking about the relationship with a performer and space, and the space between performers, is because one of our jobs is to be building the world of the performance. So we essentially are the audience, and we're looking at it to think, what meaning does an audience put into this play, into this production? So we're always thinking, like, is this telling the best version of the story? Is this communicating the meaning that we want to communicate to the audience? So what you start to then do is think, well, actually, what happens if we pull the performers further away? What happens if there's more space between the bodies on the stage, and what happens if it's closer together? And the reason a director will then do that is because often the actor is thinking about them and what their intention is. They're not necessarily looking at the bigger picture because they're thinking about what is their thought on that line. An actor is thinking about, what do I want to do to another person right now? Whereas what the director is doing is looking at the bigger picture of, what does this do to the audience? And then what they'll do is directors will think about, how can we raise the stakes for this play? So everyone's enjoying it, it's very lovely, we're seeing two people talking, we're learning about those characters, but it's not dramatic. And one of the reasons it's not dramatic is because there isn't enough tension, the stakes for the characters aren't high enough, they're not achieving what they want from the scene as a performer. And so as a director, you're looking at all of these clues that help you improve and build that drama. So in terms of my inspiration and thinking about the resources behind what would inspire this version of Mametz, one of the things I was conscious of was that I'd seen the original production, but that National Theatre Wales had produced. And that version was set very much in an environment around Usk that looked very much like the real Mametz of today. So that's interesting, because immediately looking at that original production, you can see why a Welsh theatre company would want to place such a Welsh story in a field in Wales, because it directly connects the Welsh audience and the Welsh performers to a Welsh past. So I was quite conscious of wanting to have my own vision and my own production rather than copy the original one. That's something that's very important as a director, is you do want to put your stamp on new work. And as a director, I'm really interested in pared back performances. So it means that the students, the actors, any design team, what I want them to be thinking about is what the words and what the bodies of the performers are doing with the audience. And so I'm not that interested really in the way that a naturalistic set can tell a story. I'm interested in the way that another alive human being can connect to another alive human being. So I'm then looking at other theatre companies who work in that way, And there are companies like DV8, who are dance companies, but they also make movement performance. Companies like Complicité work a lot with bodies and very pared back sets, usually in black box spaces, to think about how do they use movement as well as often quite high concept ideas to communicate universal themes to audiences.